just past 5 p.m. across India, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I'm Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Ollie Barrett. Hello, Ollie.
Hello, Tanvi. It's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next half an hour, we'll take you live to a G7 deal in Italy on coal, new post-Brexit checks at the British border, and breakdancing into the Paris Olympics. First, the headlines.
Israel will enter Rafah in South Gaza to eliminate Hamas with or without a ceasefire and hostage release deal, says Prime Minister Netanyahu. Tel Aviv warns this is the last chance for a truce deal before sending team to Cairo. G7 agrees to phase out coal in power generation between 2030 and 2035, says EU Climate Commissioner. The group commits to promote investment in innovative technologies, including biofuels. Campaigning in full swing ahead of third phase of India's elections on May 7th. BJP's Narendra Modi campaigns in Maharashtra, while Congress's Rahul Gandhi addresses public in Madhya Pradesh. And UK announces extra checks on prominent meal delivery companies to tackle illegal working. Uber Eats and other food delivery apps commit to make extra security checks on their riders. In the latest on Israel-Hamas conflict, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Tuesday that they will carry out an operation against Hamas in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, regardless of reaching a ceasefire and hostage release deal. Israel is yet to dispatch a team to Cairo on Tuesday for discussions with Hamas on the latest ceasefire plan in Gaza. A Hamas delegation has already concluded talks with Egyptian mediators and left Cairo on Monday. They will return for talks with a written response to the proposed truce. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Amman, Jordan on Tuesday as part of a broader trip to West Asia that is aimed at discussions with Arab partners over the ongoing conflict. Blinken's visits come after U.S. President Joe Biden demanded to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza earlier this month. And now let's connect with DD India's Sarah Coates, who joins us live from Tel Aviv now. First, tell us, Sarah, what progress has been made on the truce talks? Are we closer to a deal?
Hello there, Tanvi. Well, that really remains to be seen. What we do know is that this Hamas delegation has now left the Egyptian capital. They have this proposal in their hands, are reviewing it, and will go back to Cairo once a decision has been made. Still no word on whether that will be a yes or whether that will be a no, but we did hear from senior Hamas official Osama Hamdan speaking out from Beirut. He said that it's clear from the Israeli paper that they don't want a complete ceasefire and they're not talking in a serious way. But really, one of the main sticking points that's been seen time and time again during all of these ceasefire and hostage negotiations is the end to the war. Israel says it simply will not vacate the Gaza Strip and leave Hamas battalions intact, while Hamas says it will not release any of these Israeli captives if the Israelis do not withdraw from Gaza. So certainly all eyes will really be on Cairo tomorrow evening. And this is when the Hamas delegation is expected to deliver its verdict, you could say, with this paper.
And Sarah, what more you can tell us about Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan to enter Rafah, regardless of a truce deal?
We don't know too much actually about this plan, Tanvi. It's unclear at this stage whether it would be held off if a deal is accepted, or if it's not held off, what kind of scale of an operation we could see. But certainly this is something that's really putting the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu under immense pressure. He's under pressure from the right wing here in his government, specifically Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, and also Bezalel Smotrich, the Finance Minister. They've both been threatening to walk away from the government if Netanyahu does a deal with Hamas and doesn't go full strong down into that southern Gazan city of Rafah, where some 1.3 million Palestinians are sheltering, where on the other hand you have the more moderates in the Israeli establishment. We're talking here the War Cabinet member Benny Gantz. He says that the most important thing is to bring these hostages home, and that is really the sentiment also on the ground. There were pretty wild demonstrations here in Tel Aviv overnight. They started somewhat peacefully, then turned violent, with demonstrators clashing with police, a number of people arrested. They also set fires on roads, which spelled out in Hebrew and translates to English that Rafah can wait, our hostages cannot. So certainly people here on the ground are extremely fed up, and they want Netanyahu to do a deal and do it now.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for those updates. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden has urged leaders from Qatar and Egypt to apply all efforts to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas. Joe Biden held a separate phone call with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. He also discussed the dangers of a military escalation in Rafah. Besides, the two presidents also stressed the necessity of working to prevent the expansion of the conflict and reaffirmed the importance of a two-state solution as the means to achieve security and stability in the region. Now, amid talks on a ceasefire in Gaza progressing, French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné met with his Israeli counterpart Israel Katz on Tuesday in Jerusalem. Séjourné earlier visited Lebanon and Saudi Arabia on Monday, where he met with ministers from Arab and Western countries. Houthi rebels attacked two Israel-linked ships and two American destroyers in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. Houthi military spokesperson said that MSC Orion and MV Sikh Ludes were targeted with several drones and missiles.
The Yemeni armed forces carried out military operations against hostile warships in the Red Sea, of which two American warships were targeted with a number of drones. The military operations achieved their goals successfully.
On to Europe now. Energy ministers from the group of 7 countries are in Italy to set a common target date to shut down their coal-powered power plants. My colleague Ollie Barrett is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, G7 picking up from where COP28 left?
Well, Tanvi, that certainly has been the idea over the last couple of days, yes, and energy ministers from the G7 nations have agreed to end operations of their coal-fired power plants by the mid-2030s. That decision is in line with global efforts to slowly transition from fossil fuels and follows a resolution made at 2023's COP28 climate summit to slowly phase out coal power. G7 nations have also reiterated a commitment to investing in innovative technologies, including biofuels, and to cut down Russian energy revenues to support Ukraine. Well, DD India's Giles Gibson joins me now live from Rome for more on this. And Giles, how will G7 countries hit that mid-2030s coal target?
Look at the communique that's just been released by these G7 foreign ministers in Turin. There is no clear roadmap over how exactly they're going to reach this goal. There is talk about taking concrete and timely steps to achieve this goal. They also say that they want to see the International Energy Agency, the IEA, release a report in 2025 on exactly how countries within the G7 and around the world as well should be phasing out their remaining coal-powered power stations. But really, I think a big chunk of this, in terms of getting rid of coal, is going to be boosting the share that renewable energies have in these countries and in their energy mix. And there are pledges in this statement from the G7 ministers as well, talking about boosting energy storage to 1,500 gigawatts by 2030. And raising energy storage is seen as a really important part of raising the capacity of wind and solar, because of course you need a way to store up that energy when the sun is not shining, when the wind is not blowing, so that those power stations can keep energy flowing into the grid.
Giles, what have been the key sticking points, though, in reaching this agreement at the G7 level?
Well, I think if you look very closely at the language in the statement from these G7 ministers, what you see is there is a bit of a kind of what climate activists will see as a bit of a fudge, a bit of a grey area, because yes, there is this very clear pledge to phase out coal-powered stations in the first half of the 2030s, but there is also this line where it says, or in a timeline consistent with keeping a limit of 1.5 degrees centigrade temperature rise within reach. So that will certainly be seen as climate change activists as really an effort by the G7 to give themselves some manoeuvring room really here in terms of not having to exactly stick to an exact day or an exact month or an exact year even in terms of phasing out coal. I think just looking at the bigger picture here as well, of course the G7 makes up a very large slice of the global economy, around about 30%, and therefore of course a very large slice of global emissions overall. But I think we do have to state that this pledge by the G7 does not cover some of the world's largest users of coal, including India and China, who of course have made their own pledges in this area.
Giles, thank you. Now, G7 heads of state have adopted a joint declaration to fight the production, distribution and sale of illicit drugs. G7 leaders have committed to leading international efforts to dismantle drug trafficking, particularly synthetic drugs with effects such as fentanyl, and seize the illicit proceeds derived from drug dealing and preventing drug addiction, especially amongst youngsters. The G7 is also encouraging all nations concerned to take action against suppliers of the chemical precursors used to produce illegal substances. This declaration follows the adoption 2 months ago in Italy of a national plan against the illicit use of fentanyl. Russian-backed Prime Minister of Crimea Sergei Aksyonov said on Tuesday that long-range army tactical missile systems were shot down over the region. Sergei Aksyonov posted a photo on Telegram showing what he described as undetonated submunitions of ATACMS missiles. This comes after a US official had earlier said that the US had secretly shipped long-range missiles of this type to Ukraine in recent weeks for use in its conflict with Russia. Meanwhile, a Russian strike killed at least 2 people and injured 6 more in the northeastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv on Tuesday. According to Kiev, the attack damaged a residential building. Earlier, the Ukrainian Black Sea port of Odessa was struck by a Russian missile, which killed 4 people and left 28 injured. Italy is unveiling an economic package on Tuesday focusing on temporary tax breaks for firms. The package will allow the hiring of staff on open-ended contracts and a cash bonus of up to $107 for low earners. Tuesday's package is expected to raise the tax rate on productivity bonuses of more than $3,200 to 10% from the current 5%, effective in January next year. The measures are being proposed around a month before European elections. Here in the UK, physical checks have been launched on fresh food products imported from the European Union. It comes 3 years after the country left the bloc. Business groups are warning the checks will push up costs and could lead to some items disappearing from British supermarkets. DD India's Julia Chapman reports from London.
For decades, fresh food coming to the UK from the European Union could be imported at minimal hassle. As part of the bloc, the UK had the same sanitary standards as other members. But ever since it left the EU, a change has been looming.
My Lords, the controls set out in our new Border Target Operating Model, BTOM, represent a comprehensive assessment of the biosecurity and public health risks presented by imports, together with the risk of relevant pests and diseases. They allow us to assess our confidence in the exporting country's production standards and health controls. The BTOM aims to strike the right balance between allowing trade to flow and to protecting our domestic producers from threats such as African swine fever.
From now on, meat, dairy, fruit, vegetables and plants coming from the EU will face possible inspection. Anything that poses a medium risk to biosecurity will be checked visually and with temperature readings. British businesses importing from the EU will have to pay $180 a consignment. It's a significant cost as the UK imports 45% of its food. The government says in practice fewer than 1 in 100 shipments will be physically inspected, and it defends the cost to businesses, arguing that an outbreak of disease would be far more expensive. But industry groups say the changes will bring unintended consequences. There are warnings that the new rules could lead to shortages. Some wholesalers are turning away from the UK market because of the added bureaucracy and cost. And a rainy spring has led farmers to expect poor harvests this year, making the country even more reliant on imports.
Our concern is that this will disproportionately impact smaller operators, and we could see them withdraw from the market. That could subsequently reduce the choice that we have on shelves, and inevitably these additional costs have to be picked up somewhere in the supply chain. Many of our members are already operating under very tight margins.
The higher import prices will ultimately be passed on to the consumer. After the rate of inflation had been falling, the UK could see costs rise once again. Julia Chapman in London, reporting for DD India.
A 26-year-old breakdancer from England, Karam Singh, has his sights set on the Paris 2024 Olympics. The young breakdancer has just 2 remaining competitions to qualify and represent England in France this summer. The breakdancer from England's Derby has been showing off his moves to a crowd in the centre of Paris. Paris 2024 will be the first edition of the Summer Olympics to feature breakdancing as a sport. All of us in England actually have moves like that. Tanvi, by the way, back to you.
Also be interesting to break down this new Olympic sport. Thank you, Ollie. Ollie Barrett joining us all from London. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on this show. Philippines Coast Guard says vessel damaged from China's use of water cannon. China expels Philippine vessels from Scarborough Shoal. And Indonesia's Bali to host 10th World Water Forum with the theme Water for Shared Prosperity.
Versus facts. In-depth news and analysis with experts who will help you decide why this election matters. DD India is the main election headquarters, with numbers most accurate, data most reliable, and viewership across the platforms. Stay tuned to the Great Indian Election only on weekdays at 8:30 p.m. IST and 1500 hours GMT.
Thank you for staying with us on DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Up next, we bring you the latest on India's elections. Onto the country's north, where the Bahari community in Jammu and Kashmir is playing a decisive role in the political battle for Anantnag Rajouri seat, which is being called the hot seat in the third phase of India's elections. Rajouri and Poonch districts of Jammu division have the highest number of Pahari people. DD India's Ramatyagi spoke to the leader of Pahari community in Rajouri.
We have with us Ehsan Mirza, who belongs to Bahari community. Ehsanji, if we talk about the different political parties, BJP is fighting on PM Modi's face, and BJP is saying that after 370 there is a big development and people will cast their vote on that development. And on the other side, the other parties are saying that they will bring back 370. So what is your take on that?
This scheduled tribe status which we have got, if 370 would have been there, we would have not been able to achieve this what we have got.
Was it a big hurdle?
Yes, it was a big hurdle. In fact, our Gujar brothers, they have got the political reservation. That is only because of the abrogation of 370. Because after the abrogation of 370, all the laws, they have been implemented here, and every schemes which the government is basically implementing and which the government want that it should go to the basic person, basic poor peoples, and no, after abrogation of 370, you must have find that it's a peaceful atmosphere right now here.
Now, Goa too goes to polls on May the 7th. As the region gears up for elections, voters in Goa are torn between acknowledging development efforts and the pressing need for environmental conservation. DD India's Jessica Taneja has filed this report.
Located on the Zwari River at Kottalam village, this cable-stayed bridge is one of the most complex bridges in the world that can withstand a load of 1,000 tons. Waterways below it is an important route for Marmagam Port Trust and is considered a crucial link between North and South Goa. South Goa has become an important focus not just for the Congress party but also for the BJP. In the last 3 months, the Prime Minister has had 2 public rallies in South Goa. Voter concerns vary from infrastructure development to maintaining the ecology and also making sure that the less the environment is harmed, the better it is for the people of Goa. While the electorate faces a daunting task in selecting representatives who can effectively address their concerns, here in Madgaon, some voters are content with the development work and believe the government has been able to find a swift and equitable resolution.
There are a few schemes in terms of for rural individuals, also households that they have given. At the same time, electricity, there are few things like, the reduction of the, electricity bills, which I've seen in past 10 years, which has been given to the, to the voters of South Goa.
Others say the elected representatives have to prioritize environmental conservation and remain committed to implementing sustainable solutions to combat pollution and other issues.
Major concern, being a Goan citizen for last 26 years, is the tourism. I mean, we go to the beaches very often, but we don't see clean beaches, and there's dirt everywhere, parking facilities are not good, no security on the beach.
BJP's first woman candidate in Goa poll history, entrepreneur and educationist Pallavi Dempo, is confident of securing a win and hopes to resolve these issues effectively.
I would like to work on, especially here in South Goa, would be in the areas of education, women empowerment, skilling, agriculture, tourism, right? Because that's going to be my key areas that I would like to work on.
The Congress is focusing on the failures in tackling rising unemployment, inflation, and dwindling land resources.
Our lands are being sold. It's not that we despise anybody coming and staying here. But if this process goes on, the fear is in a few more years, a decade or 2 or 3 or 4 decades, this Goa will be another Bombay, another Mumbai, another Calcutta. And then who will come here? What for? If that old charm doesn't remain, it will be problematic.
With more than 1 million voters in Goa, contest for these parliamentary seats is beyond political personalities and will be the testing ground for many policies that can balance economic development with environmental conservation. Jessica Taneja for DD India.
Staying with India, Admiral Dinesh Kumar Tripathi assumed command as the 26th Chief of the Indian Naval Staff in the national capital on Tuesday. During his career spanning nearly 40 years, the former Vice Chief of Naval Staff held various important operational and staff appointments. He also served as the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Western Naval Command. Admiral Tripathi succeeds Admiral R. Hari Kumar. Speaking to media, the new Navy chief assured that the Indian Navy will always be ready to protect India's maritime interests.
Over the years, our Navy has evolved into a combat-ready, cohesive, credible and future-proof force. The existing and emerging challenges in the maritime domain mandate that the Indian Navy should remain operationally ready at all times to deter potential adversaries at sea, in peace, and to win the war at and from the sea when asked to do so. This will remain my singular focus and endeavor.
Now, Beijing and Manila have repeatedly clashed in recent months at the submerged reef. In the latest, both sides witnessed standoff and traded accusations over aggressive maneuvers there, and the Philippines recently summoned a Chinese diplomat over the actions. Tensions flared again as China's Coast Guard said on Tuesday that it barred a Philippine Coast Guard ship and another vessel from waters adjacent to the Scarborough Shoal. Meal delivery companies Deliveroo, Just Eat and Uber Eats are making extra security checks on their British riders to step up efforts to cut illegal working. UK's illegal migration minister Michael Tomlinson said that illegal working had put customers at risk, drove down wages and defrauded the taxpayer after he met the three companies on Monday. Also, 42% of riders stopped by an enforcement team in April last year and they were found to be working illegally. Deliveroo is the first to roll out a new substitute registration feature, including the right to work checks. And next we take a look at what else is happening around the world. Kenya's President William Ruto held a special cabinet meeting on Tuesday to assess the flood response situation after the heavy flooding caused widespread damage to the African nation. According to the Interior Ministry of Kenya, at least 91 people have been reported missing, for whom search operations are being conducted. The flash floods and mudslide also killed over 40 people. And Disney released the first teaser trailer for the upcoming animated drama adventure Mufasa, the Lion King on Monday, a prequel to the famous Lion King. The film's voice cast was also revealed alongside, including a new and returning stars lending their voices to it.
A lion was born without
the movie is set to release in December this year.
A lion who would change our lives forever.
That's all for this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on our different social media handles and also on our DD India mobile app. You can scan the QR code on your screen